All right, everyone. We're doing a Smiles rant. I kept putting this off, and by putting this off, I mean forgetting to do it. But then I remembered to do it. Here we are. Game's not open yet, so you can't say that I'm late. It's against the rules. As always, I'm Smiles. I'm doing a rant. This is age 108 final changes. I'm unemployed. I have a degree in business. I'd like a job. Feel free to ask me about that. I'm also going back to school in the winter for some databasing and SQL stuff. That'll be fun. Let's get to it. All right, we don't know the age length yet. Age length's important for mostly science. The difference of 1 week can make a big difference in science since it's sort of like an exponential growth power curve thing. But oh well, we'll see what happens. Um General mechanics. Elites are now doing damage to dragons based on offense and defense. So, this is about a 10 to 100% damage increase depending on what elite you're using. If you're using a Dryad elite, you're doing 20 damage instead of 18. Not a big difference. But something like a Fairy elite, Elf elite, or Dwarf elite, you're getting about 50% more damage in. And I believe the best bang for your buck is a Dark Elf Elite is doing double damage because it's a 10/10. So, assuming you don't just have all your armies home when the dragon's sent, this mostly is only going to affect elite defense-based people. So I guess Fairy and Dark Elf would be the most likely to have a bunch of elites home. We'll see later that Dark Elf has 10-point D-specs now, so mixing in elites has no change to their defense. So if you just happen to have extra gold as a Dark Elf, you can mix in elites as your defense, and you're basically slaying with double damage D-specs. So that's pretty cool. We'll see how that goes. Massacre damage reduced by 15%. This is a big buff to a lot of things. It's a big buff to core just having less defense in general. One of the problems with running Suicide Core these days is that a lot of the server has figured out how to just throw a bunch of massacres and raises your way, and it's impressive how few masses and raises can really mess up your province, and you can do that as an alternative to chaining, especially when you have net worth problems. It's also a good benefit to hybrids. A lot of hybrids have been in a position where you take one or two masses and you're essentially just out of the game. This should also be a buff to TMs that don't want to run huge raw numbers. Like a lot of rogues with 8 TPA, yeah, you just chain them because they're already full of stuff. They're like half chained just based on their training. However, if you run like a 5 TPA, 6 TPA rogue, in favor of more defense, it used to be pretty easy to drop a mass into you and then use other rogues to target you. That's going to be a little bit safer to do for the low TPA people. So I'd say it's both a buff to like Suicide Core, which is a nerf to TMs, and a buff to a lot of hybrids and certain TM styles. So I'm not going to say this is better for core or for TMs or for hybrids, but it's definitely better for hybrids. If you join a war, you can't do anything. I think most people are fine with that. I think the intent of this, because I'm in the Changes Council, so I get to read things, was that your province was effectively frozen in war. I believe as it's written right now, in theory, you'd just be able to keep gaining net worth and training and stuff, which might be a little awkward. Like if you just, I don't know, if you're in like a 2 week long war and you're essentially in a sandbox, you could, I don't know, make yourself 400 net worth per acre and swing like auto win rules. I think that's really unlikely and not a big deal, but my understanding right now is that David C. doesn't quite like the wording and implementation of this, and so there's some discussion behind the scenes on what we're going to do. This might just be removed, it might be altered before finals. Well, I mean, finals are posted, but before the game goes live. It's not really a balance thing, so I don't think anyone should actually give a shit whatever happens there, but... Removed bounce, attack, gangbang protection. You know, for final changes, we should really use MAP, multi-attack protection, but I won't tell if you don't. This was my doing entirely. I'm the guy that started doing a lot of raise bounces, I don't know, 15 ages ago, 10 ages ago. And then some people who were my victims then started to use it against others, and mostly we saw it really affecting micros and cows that were not quite prepared enough for, you know, being hostile with 15 to 20 orcs that were going to hurt you. Most kingdoms will never really see this come into play. I don't think most people ever really experimented with bounces. But the way the gangbang protection was implemented essentially created a mechanical hard cap on the amount of military damage you could do to a province by bouncing them, and it was like 20% of their military. And I'm talking like if 20 provinces bigger than you all piled onto you, like it was just strictly worse than hitting them a couple times, even if you put in 10 times the effort. And I don't think we were able to find like a good compromise, and so I just said, let's just remove it, and if it becomes a problem again, we can start over. There's not a ton of picks in this series of changes that I think can really abuse this anyways, so I think we're fine, but we'll see. As I mentioned, this mechanic is best used against either high elite, low D-spec core, like a bunch of orcs that have their armies home. You can bounce them, you can kill a lot of elites. It's okay against TMs that you can't break, because bouncing repeatedly does a lot more kills than, for example, conquesting. Conquesting, you lose a lot more of your own troops. You're giving the enemy gangbang protection, which reduces the amount of losses they take on future hits, and conquests just do less damage. So this is I would say, most often used as an alternative to conquest chaining TMs in like 3 to 7 day long wars. It works. It's not perfect. It's not overpowered by far. And it can be easily mitigated. You can run Stalwart. You can get hospitals. You can have really high defense. You can run a lot of D-specs. You can run, you know, modest resilience psi. Things like that. You can just not get into hostiles with people that give you a threat here. So that's my thoughts on that. Any questions on that and how to abuse it, please let me know. I used this to really mess up Swea one age. They were going growth. They were about 2 times our size. And what we did is we sent our whole kingdom raise bouncing on 2 of their provinces, just regular core. We brought their defense down by about 90%, and then we learned them like 20 times each. And so we were able to get learn games on provinces that didn't have a lot of offense, and we were able to get them to just fuck off, because sometimes you need the growth kingdom to just fuck off, and they're not going to do it if you can't hurt them. Now you can hurt them. So this is how we farmed one of their like human sages for half their books. And then the very next age, they went and utterly destroyed a Ghetto Vet's cow. And then 1 or 2 ages later, gangbang protections on bounces were implemented. So I wonder what happened there. Nobody knows. This is an interesting change. I would have actually liked to see the income change simultaneously nerfed, or the income bonus from activity. So what you get now is if you have 6, 8, 12, I think that's the numbers, I don't know, ticks of activity in a day, you get half, 1 times, 2 times your income. You also get 1 to 3 ticks of book generation. Not scientist generation, book generation only. So if you're getting extreme bonus every day, that's about a 12% book difference over before. So science in general is just stronger server wide. That ends up at about a 4% efficiency buff if you know, do some conversions. The thing is, I think the average person probably gets to like the middle buff every single day of the whole age, and then some really active Nellies get the max buff. So just a little bit more encouragement to get that max bonus. The thing is that getting 2 ticks instead of 3 ticks on the books is a lot less impactful than 2 ticks versus, or 100% versus 200% on the income. So as is, in terms of like, I want to win this war or be stronger than everyone else, getting the extreme bonus is still more impactful via income than books. But I like this. I like more science in play. I like more, you know, benefits to being active. Explorer cost formula is no longer discounted by land lost in combat over the age. So this is super niche and affects literally no one, and so shouldn't be in the game, because it's just like 2 nerds that give a shit that run growth kingdoms or province explorers. Essentially, if you are a TM and all age long, you just slowly grow through explorers and paradising, and then you want to become like a cow at the end of age, it's really expensive. Because if you lose a lot of land in the age, your explorers get cheaper. What this means is if you're a big orc and you're trading 3 times your acres every war back and forth, at the end of age, your explorers are a lot cheaper, you can grow a lot more. I think that's actually a good mechanic. I think this being removed is just straight up bad. I was against this. I was overruled. I didn't push that hard because in the end it doesn't affect a lot of people. But it will make it way harder for kingdoms not in first place to explore. I don't know why you would add that in. That's super dumb. So it's going to be way harder to overcome number 1 land because of this change. Because a number 1 land kingdom that only grew, never war, has the exact same costs they always had. But if you're a kingdom that had 5 wars, you won, you lost, you won, you lost, all your big cores are trading a lot of acres, your TMs get hit, but they get buffed up with war wins. It used to be that position, your explorers were cheaper. Now they're not. So now first place is just even more super well advantaged, and it's really dumb, in my opinion. I don't really give a shit about land anyways, so whatever. But that's my explanation on why that's a terrible change that only people that are stupid wanted. But whatever. Honor no longer gives military efficiency, gives OME instead. So this is basically undoing a change from a couple ages ago, maybe like 10 ages ago, I don't know how long, which halved the OME bonus, turned it into an ME bonus, and then everyone got it. This essentially gives the average, you know, Lord or Baron core 2 to 3% offense. You're not really talking much about V count plus cores anyways. So you're just looking at like a 2 to 3% offense increase for the average core. But for the average Viscount, Count, or Marquis TM, they are losing 3, 4, maybe 6% of their defense. And when you're looking at Dukes and Princes, they're going to lose about 10% defense, which is huge. So this is just a huge nerf to TM defense. So be aware that just because you have a, you know, Duke TM later, you're not just automatically beating everyone like you used to. It appears that the wiki's down on the other screen. I was going to pull it up to show the graphs there, or not the graphs, the charts, but I guess we can't do that. So this is just a straight nerf to TMs and buff to core especially that want to smash stuff. There are a lot of situations where you had a higher defense core that was benefiting from this, sort of a more hybrid style. That's going to be nerfed as well. Assassinate Wizard damage increased by 17.5%. I think we all just agreed that Assassinate Wizards has been, like, everyone just props instead if they're in that situation. Through whatever means and changes over the last 10 ages, it seems like AW's just really gotten kind of useless. So we thought it was appropriate to buff it. Also, massacres instead of AW has just sort of been a thing. So we still wanted a way to target wizards, even with massacres being nerfed, and a benefit to actually having, strong rogues in a long war outside of just having to do prop runs. Pops have been reduced in meter slightly. I don't know what the exact amount on this is. So we'll see probably when the test age in Genesis goes up in a couple hours. People can experiment. I think it's down to 2/3 of what it was last age. I'm just guessing. Mutual meter declare lowered to 60. I don't think that changes a lot. Sometimes if you needed to build swap before a war, but you didn't want to just eat a whole wave, and maybe you were in a position where you could eat some ops yourself, you would follow and meter a wave, build swap, and then be able to declare later. This just brings that sort of window that you can play with down a bit. I don't think it's a huge change. I don't think a lot of wars get declared this way anyways. I forget what the exact change is here on the war win land shuffle. I think it's just slightly different on how things change. I don't know. Things like this, I don't even bother to evaluate. I just win a war or two and say, oh, it works like this now. It's gonna feel mostly the same, I think. Whatever. Dragon hit points increased by 10%. This is to combine with the added elite damage, and also all of these are slightly buffed. We can see here, basically a 20% buff to every effect. 20 becomes 25, 15 becomes 20, 10 becomes 15, 25 becomes 30, 25 becomes 30. It's not a big change. The biggest buff here is actually Ruby went up by 50% in effect. I think that's maybe an overstep. I think we're just going to see a lot of rubies being sent to TMs, and TMs having a lot more of a hard time than ever. So yeah, 15%, getting a little sketchy on tanking there. Maybe you could have tanked a ruby at 10% and kept your TMs alive and preferred that to, say, tanking a sapphire. But now, with 30% wages, Dark Elf and Elf both have wage penalties, which we'll see, and 15% defense, I could see that getting a little bit too much. So maybe you're against, a tactician core, and you're pretty sure their TMs are going to tank a dragon. I could see you sending a ruby instead of a sapphire now, just because it hurts their defense so bad. Topaz burns 4% instead of 3% now. So there's that too. And we get to the races. I don't know if I should really compare things to Age 107. I guess I will a little bit. Things are sort of pretty different, but at the same time a little bit familiar, so. Avians don't change much, but they gain Clear Sight and Town Watch. So, their attack time, their birth rate, essentially the same. Immunity to ambush is pretty strong in some situations, especially growth related and out of war hits that can't be ambushed. When you have a casualty penalty and a relatively easy to ambush elite, ambushes can be pretty strong, but meh. Um, I thought ambush immunity didn't matter much, and then there was an age not that long ago where Barco was all avians, and I had a couple hostiles with them where I really wanted to ambush and I couldn't, and it annoyed me. So if I think about things that actually happened, the ambush immunity's pretty significant. But if I just think in general, I want to say it's not. So, it could go either way. Clear Sight is a pretty strong buff on core. I don't like it as much as some people. Some people swear by Clear Sight. My theory is that mostly Clear Sight's good if you want to protect horses, and if it's hard to Mystic Vortex you. If you're just Night Striking one province, you just pick an offline province, you Mystic Vortex their Clear Sight, and you're good to go. But it depends just how overactive everyone is. Sometimes if you just have enough people that can log in and cast Clear Sight, especially if you really know you're the next target, it can be hugely beneficial. Town Watch can be insane, especially with the birth rate. And last age, I saw a lot of instances where people were just chaining based on peasants and doing a lot of damage there. So having Town Watch is huge. You've got military casualty problems. You've got a ton of build space because you're an avian. You don't need racks. You don't need stables. So you're fitting in homes. You're fitting in hospitals. You have a birth rate thing. You're going to have 2 times birth rate. You're going to have an insane amount of peasants. Even if they fireball you, even if they chass you, avians are going to get out of fuck control. So there is, and massacres are nerfed. Like, there is going to be no way to deal with avian peasants other than overpop, and they got Town Watch, so if they're online, overpopping them is going to be really hard, even if they start with 30,000 peasants. Problem with avian is, and we saw it last age, almost no one picked them, they don't have a lot of offense. Like, they have essentially mounted O-spec offense, and that's just the price you pay for having this much attack speed. I think Avian Warriors are a really strong pick for this age. I think they have a ton of bonuses. I think Greater Protection lets you tank up a bit more than you might expect. I think an Avian Warrior core that has hospitals and homes and TGs and watchtowers, just your most plain Jane thing ever, super strong. Another thing about attack time is you never have to run castles, really. If you have a good attack time, you're going to take a lot less overpop damage in general, because when other people are returning in 11 or 10 ticks, you're going to be returning in like 6 ticks. It's just really hard to overpop avians. The less ticks you have of overpop, the easier it is to flood soldiers your way. The Town Watch is going to get kind of sketchy, so I think Avian's a lot stronger relative to last age. You've got a lot of nerfs to TMs next age, so you're going to see lower offense core being more successful there. Now, the counter to Avian is just to have more defense on your core and just out-hit them via offense and defense, usually. So we'll see about that. I don't have much more to say about them. I think maybe I had one thing in mind add, but I forgot what it was, so we'll move on. Dark Elf. So we took quite a big military nerf here. You lost 1 on the O spec and 1 on the D spec. Losing 10% defense like that is going to really make it hard to be a pure TM. However, like last age, you've got a huge list of spells. No Chastity. Actually, I don't think any race has chastity now, so I think we're forced to have mystics for chastity. But, you have an incredibly easy end of war ceasefire because your spec credits end of war are giving you basically double gold value. You're not buying armory reduced O specs and D specs, you're buying full cost thieves. 10% WPA is just a nice little buff there, and 0 rune cost. This means you can Paradise as a 100,000 acre province when everyone else is spending, a million runes a cast. Yours are free. It's ridiculous. Early age, your ability to abolish ritual for free, do meteor shower runs, mystic vortexes, things like that. If you're like a hybrid or a core, the savings on landlust, all this stuff is incredible, but you're paying for it. You're paying for it in wages. You're paying for it in offense and defense. It's an interesting spot. I think Dark Elf is looking like a pretty good hybrid. I don't know if I'd want to run a lot of them, but you certainly could. You could run an entire kingdom of Dark Elves and be scary. It's not my favorite kind of pick when it looks like this. I think it needs just a little more oomph. But I think a kingdom with a lot of Dark Elves, a medium amount of Dark Elves, and a little amount of Dark Elves are all going to do great. So it's not weak. It's just not my cup of tea exactly. Because my most important factor for a TM is always their defense, and they just have nothing. And so, yeah, you can train an extra 10 or 20% D-specs and start cutting things, and you got Invis to help, you got Mage's Fury to help, you got a little buff here, you get to run 0 towers in theory, so that's 10 or 15% build space that can go into forts, it can go into homes to increase your population. So, yeah, they're not weak. I think they're weaker than last age, though. So, pick your poison a little bit. Yeah, you just can't hit quite the same military numbers as you could. But Dark Elf seems pretty good. You got that elite. If you're running them hybrid, you're running them TM, and you can fit those elites in with your D specs, you can slay dragons pretty good. So you got that going for you. Very interesting race. We haven't seen the 0 rune cost in a while. You could certainly run 20 Dark Elf Heretics and have an insane amount of nightmares going on and use 100 generals every single wave on every chain you want going down to 0 acres. And you're not losing a lot for that. So I think you can leverage it pretty well. I think if you have like 1 or 2 Dark Elves or 10 plus Dark Elves, you're going to be stronger than if you have like 4 to 6. But what do I know? Dryad. This is me entirely. When I was looking over what we had in Revised, I felt like we were lacking a hard hitter. I mean, there's Orc, obviously, but we used to have Orc was a pretty hard hitter, Human was a pretty hard hitter, and Undead was a pretty hard hitter. Human got reflavored quite a bit, Undead got removed, Orc became purely glass cannon, so I really wanted to add something that was just gonna punch you, but not do anything else very well. And I think we have a pretty good fit here with Dryad. They've got no bonuses other than Tree of Gold. They're doing less kills, and they attack very slow. Their O-Spec is even better than the Dark Elf O-Spec, just because of their horse. Their elite is huge. They've got Tree of Gold, so they're going to get those elites pretty early. So even End of War Ceasefire 2, War number 2 or 3, Dryads are probably going to come out early age very strong. I think they'll start to struggle a bit in the mid-age, and then I think late age they're going to start getting pretty strong again. So if you're worried about dryads or you see some scary kingdoms out there with dryads, pick your moment to target them. As soon as your own core starts having full elite, that's when you need to engage dryads and start really hurting them. Um, they need a lot of buildings, right? They've got that super tiny elite, which means they're either running extra D-specs or they're very vulnerable to bounce raises and kill stacking. You're going to be able to ambush them very easily, so there's a lot of ways that you can target and damage the Dryad, and if you just ignore all of those and lose to Dryads, don't come crying. Just, be better. Um, but yeah, they have a metric ass load of offense. They're going to be running 400 OPA when your core's running 300. Like, it's just, that's the deal. So I hope the other benefits of your core can compensate. And if they can't, you're going to lose. Like, sucks to suck, but that's the way it is. A Dryad Tactician, this bonus is completely gone, and you're basically just like a warrior of any other race. But you do still have more offense as a Dryad Tact, I think. So, I think a big wall of Dryad Tacts is going to do excellently. I think there's space for Dryad hybrids, because you can run like 14 D-specs per acre and just like 3 or 4 or 5 elites per acre and still manage strong hits. Anytime you have a really big elite, you can think of it as a way to run hybrid for very little pop space. So keep that in mind also. Maybe you'll be happy there. A bunch of Dryad Mystics could be kind of cool. Like I said, like if you have 12, 14 D-specs per acre and like 5 Dryad Mystics and just a few elites per acre, you're going to be getting good peasants, you're going to be hard to fireball, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage with your Mystic kit, and then you can just toss out masses and raises with your spare offense, or you can very slowly over time grow, gain more peasants, and win via attrition like that. I think that's perfectly viable, and if not just viable, then quite strong. But it's finicky, it's weird. Like you're not gonna just have everything for free. There's always drawbacks. So, this is my Dryad. I hope everyone likes it. Dwarf. I really wanted to play Dwarf and make Dwarf work because I thought it was pretty cool last stage. As you can see, mostly it's completely unchanged. Same spell, same main bonuses, sort of. Exact same military, but losing the free building construction is a huge nerf. And I don't think they necessarily needed a huge nerf, so I was really keen on Dwarf. I still think Dwarf is super doable, but I really wanted that free build, so now I'm sort of annoyed. But one of my big picks for this age was Dwarf Tact. It's just got a little bit more power than the Avian. You've got that building efficiency, and I think build space and attack speed are both really valuable this upcoming age for the core. So that's something I really liked looking at. Not a lot for me to say about Dwarf. You stack your building efficiency, you've just got crazy effective builds, especially late age. You're trolling in with 160, 180% build efficiency, you're maxing out buildings. In a situation where TMs are all wrecked and it's core versus core, sometimes having, 130% BE and 20 hospitals and 20 guard stations is just how you win, and it's not really about the raw numbers. So we'll see. And another thing, like if TMs are really going to get screwed this age due to offense and defense, and you think like, well, who's benefiting the most from having peasants? And it's like, well, building efficiency is really something where you want to be on the up end of peasants, because you're multiplying your BE, and when your base BE is like 50% because you got no peasants, then you're multiplying your bonus by 50%. But if your base BE is like 120% because you got some science and you got 10 PPA, suddenly this is multiplying out, multiplicatively, and you're getting really strong bonuses there. So I think Dwarf's a bit of a diamond in the rough when the TMs all suck, but we'll see. Elf. I was hoping Elf would keep at least minus 40% military casualties. Maybe the minus 50% that had in revised was too much, but I feel like at minus 30%, it lacks a bit of oomph. It's got the 10 D-spec, the 12 elite. It's just the worst offense and defense of any race. There's nothing special happening. You're losing a little bit of value from dungeons. 30% wages is actually quite significant if you're running elites. If you're running a pure D-spec TM, then the wages sort of just compensate for running D-specs instead of elites. But man, they just have nothing in terms of military. 30% casualties, yeah, it's great. You're quite a bit more sustainable, but there's just nothing happening here. You don't have the defense to be a pure TM. You're a pretty sad hybrid because, the hybrid Dryad, as I mentioned before, has 50% more offense per troop and the same defense. Now, 25% WPA, absolutely huge. +1 mana, absolutely huge. You are 100% aiming for your elf to be using and abusing their magic to the fullest. So whether that means you're a core that's acting, 80% as good as other cores, but then almost doing as much damage as like a mystic, or you're a hybrid that's just super successful, or you're a TM. Like, if you're an elf mystic and unbreakable, you're gonna crush. You're gonna absolutely wreck all the other TMs. It's just, how are you gonna get there? There's so little defense. But this much WPA and the +1 mana are insane. If you can hybrid it and keep it alive, if you can run it TM, if you can run it a core and get value out of this, absolutely insane. It's so strong. But just in terms of numbers, man, I don't like it on the off, on the def. But +1 mana to tick, that's 33% more nightmare if you're a heretic. 25% WPA stacking with, heretic or mystic channeling, stacking with guild or wizard production buff, stacking with mage's fury. Like, the numbers get really bonkers. Like, I ran a bunch of test simulations, whatever you want to call it. I was using one guy in the age changes posted this. I recommend everyone test it out. I have like a ton of builds here. I went through all the mystics. You can see I went through all the tacks because I really like tactician. I really like mystic to see what I liked. And yeah, nothing could compare to elf numbers, no matter how I played with it. So like, that's just inevitable. You have to think, well, what do I do to match that? And I mean, if you need the defense to not get chained, to not get massacred, well, elf's not gonna do it. But well, maybe minus casualties and mist and wrath is gonna slow people down. You've got extra mana, WPA, you land less the land back, they lose their offense, you keep your defense, and sure, you take some hits, but you emerge the other side. That's super possible. I think that's quite possible. So I've talked a lot about elf without saying much, if you may have noticed, but that's what I'm thinking. Now, similarly, we have +1 mana. So, same bonus essentially as elf, but instead of that WPA buff, we've got 25% duration. So this is nice on selfies, because of course with all racial spells, you have a ton of self spells you want to keep cast. And with this duration, of course, your meteor showers, your chastities, I guess fairy doesn't have chastity anymore. but Mystic does. Your greeds, your explosions. I don't know what else you're casting. Your ETs. 25% is 25%, right? Like, that's 25% extra damage, effectively. Um, so, like, the output of Fairy, especially as Mystic, is insane. The output of even, say, a Fairy Heretic that's running, +1 mana Nightmare, you're not getting benefits from this buff as much, but, you're still doing really good. You've got all those benefits that Dark Elf has. You have the Guile, you have the Invis, you have the Mage's Fury. So you can go Heretic, you get those benefits. You've got slightly better Thieves. Like, that's the one thing I'll say for Elf, is that until you're like a Count or better, your Elf is not running TDs. Your Elf is not running TPA. Your Elf is running 3 TPA and 25 Watchtowers, because nothing else is going to do it, as far as safety goes. And so if you're relying entirely on magic, you're not valuable. Like, if you sit there and cast Meteor Showers on their rogues and even on their Mage's Fury Mystics because you're an elf, you're gonna get a huge amount of honor. You're gonna be super valuable, but I'm quite partial to adding in those Night Strike runs, and that's something Fairy can do a little bit better. You've got the Fountain of Knowledge. You've got the Invis, you got the Guile, and it does stack up quite a bit. And now, you've got Clear Sight. We haven't had Clear Sight on a TM in a long time, and maybe people don't remember how strong it is, but it's very strong. Because you're not really just expecting to Mystic Vortex the Fairy Mystic very easily. Now, an Elf might be able to do it, don't get me wrong. If you have Elf Mystics and a bunch of, say, Halfling Rogues, you could go out of your way to target Fairy Mystics that think they can cut a few Watchtowers and assassinate wizards with them with your bonus damage assassinate wizards this age. So there's a lot of potential there. We did lose the 1 point on the Elite versus last age. The income I don't think mattered much, but you got rid of that income problem. The Elites are pretty cheap. You've got Tree of Gold, you're going to be able to afford Elites, no problem. But Fairy also lost Salvation this age, because it's no longer on Elf. And Fairy lost Ghost Workers. So Fairy took like a 5, 6, 7% building efficiency nerf. They're also taking 15% more kills if they're being targeted. So they did take some hidden nerfs this age that you might not realize, but they gained Clear Sight. I think overall, Fairy is as strong as last age, whereas I think the other TMs we'll see and the other TMs we've seen are all quite a bit worse, and I think Fairy's the same. So if you think Fairy was doable last age, this isn't including the, honor changes and other core changes, just, in a vacuum, Fairy this age, Fairy last age. I think Fairy's about the same. So Fairy wasn't the most popular pick in Age 107, but several kingdoms had 1 or 2 or 3 fairies. I don't think I saw many 4 fairy kingdoms, but they were regularly successful. I think they got overlooked a lot. I think with +1 mana, they soaked up a lot of honor, especially with those meteor showers and stuff, so I think Fairy's a pretty good pick, but do watch out for those hidden changes like Ghost Workers. And, if you're in a situation where you have to spend money on elites, and you have to pump wizards, and you have to explore because you got chained, it's a lot harder to be a fairy than it is to be someone that can just build these specs. So, it is what it is. But in general, I think Fairy's looking pretty strong. You're not going to match that WPA of Elf, but it is what it is. Halfling. Halfling took a pretty big nerf just in losing that 10% defense. It's huge. Now, income changed. Building efficiency changed. and you're gaining 25% TPA. So Halfling's buffed 3 separate ways, nerfed 2 ways. You no longer have the combo TD Watchtower. And in that, I think Halfling Core, Halfling Hybrid, Halfling Heretic, Halfling Mystic are all much worse than last age. But I think Halfling Rogue is the same or better. Because this TPA change is gonna help the D-Spec change. You know, you run 1 or 2 less TPA, you run 1 or 2 more D-Spec per acre, it kind of evens out, not exactly, but pretty close. But, and as a rogue, it's not like you really needed watchtowers, right? So, specifically, the Halfling Rogue feels very strong, and like, of course it does. Every age where there's plus TPA somewhere, you're going to want that on a rogue. Just like if you've got plus WPA, you probably want that on a mystic. It's, that's not particularly high level analysis or anything. But the birth rate does especially suck for rogues, because rogues are absolutely the #1 target for fireballs outside of just, fat core that you aren't actively chaining. But hugely good. Big pain, and yeah, sure, you can compensate by kidnapping, but like not really you can, because like that was always an option. And also, if you're kidnapping as a pure rogue with a bunch of TPA, like, yeah, okay, so any shitty hybrid could kidnap. Like, it's sort of a waste. If you fireball them a lot, you have ET on them, they're feeling like they have to use their stealth every tick, and they're just kidnapping. Well, great, you've just completely neutralized the rogue. All the rogue is now is like a bad fireball monkey. So, I do think Halfling Rogue's very strong, especially if they can get some WPA in there to slow down the fireballs and stuff. I think if they can run lower TPA, they will be able to manage the defense a little bit better. But again, remember that there's just nerfs in general to TM defense. Like, it's just going to be a little bit harder. So, it's not a free pass like maybe it has been recently. You did lose 10% defense in the D-Spec. You did lose probably a 10% offense defense swing through Honor. That's a lot of percentages. 25% TPA is pretty big, though. Like, that's a lot. And you got the AW buff. So now halflings can sort of be your solution to heretics and mystics, because you can actually kill their wizards now instead of YOLOing prop and 8 times out of 10 it sucks, and 2 times out of 10 you feel like a god. Great for the degenerate gamblers among us, but not maybe the best balance. So, also, you absolutely can run a Halfling Heretic, Halfling Mystic. They're just not guaranteed infinitely safe like they used to be. But you can run a high TPA, and as long as you're not against other Halfling Rogues, if you're against, I don't know, Fairy Rogues, Elf Rogues, Dark Elf Rogues, you can sort of run just a high TPA Mystic, high TPA Heretic, and maybe have like 8 Watchtowers, but you mostly run TDs, and you can be pretty strong. But I think the last 2 ages with the combo Thieves' Dens, Watchtowers, the Halflings were just bonkers as Mystics. That's what I was running. They were pretty successful. Not as good as they could have been, but that's just because I think they're lazy. Lazy. Anyways. Human. Well, not the same at all, right? Completely different changes. So Human lost their Warhorse. They lost offense on their Elite. Yeah, they got +1 O-Spec, but their offense was nerfed twice, so much weaker. They got GP, which is a nice bit of defense. They got Income with no wage penalty. So this is more an old school-ish type Human. 35% science efficiency is the single best bonus that any race has. But you're dealing with having that elf-style military. And they have the single biggest, well, okay. second biggest penalty that any race has. Sorry. Third third worst penalty any race has is this 30% WPA. Um so humans in a weird spot. With the science efficiency and greater protection, they're actually up there for highest level of defense if you want a pure TM. But like, when you're looking at TMs with plus one mana, plus 25% TPA, and you're like, well, I can build D specs and have 30% minus WPA. It's a little sketchy. I ran a bunch of numbers for some human TMs, mostly Mystic. You're never fixing that WPA gap. You're getting close. You're getting real close on fixing the WPA gap, but you're never matching a elf ever. And I mean, I don't think that's surprising anyone. 70% versus 125% WPA is pretty big gap to try and fix, no matter your science. So they're struggling a ton with offense. They're not struggling on defense with the pop space, the building efficiency, the sciences, whatever. You can get good defense. I think a human rogue can actually significantly outpower a halfling rogue, but you got the WPA problem. And when every single good thing a human has is tied to this single bonus, and you have this penalty, and you have absolutely no mitigation to amnesia, you're gonna get screwed. We've seen amnesia more and more the last few ages. It takes a ton of honor. Your humans are just gonna get farmed. They're always going to be lords and barons if you run them. They're going to get amnesia all the time. They're going to get learned. It's rough. They have no benefit to just their army, right? They're not attacking faster. They're not attacking harder. There's no bonus gains. They don't have a lot of offense. Like, there's nothing really going for them. Just this giant bonus. So, if you can make it work, you can make it work. I'm not sure the best way to make it work. You can put 2 million books into tactics and have plus 60% OME, and that's great. But, other people just have 50% more offense than you. It's sort of how it is. But yeah, you're absolutely going to be the richest core. When you pump your elites, like, sure, if you have 15 EPA and everyone else has 12 EPA, your offense is sort of getting even to everyone else's, but now you have extra net worth to everyone else. You're getting chain deeper. It's like a really big struggle bus. So, you're overpopped and you want to land lost. Like, there's a lot of problems here. I think people that solely AFK science farm, they're going to be stronger than ever. Like, watch out for micros this age. Micros are going to be just absolute cancer mid to late age with these human bonuses because, they're going to have 1 TPA, they're going to have 1 WPA, and they're going to have 25 elites per acre, and they're just going to fuck you in the butt. And, like, that sucks. On the plus side, raise bounce is back in the game, so make sure you target and eliminate micros often, because screw them. Like, I mean, that's another thing. If you just leave someone on the server that's just being as greedy as possible for 8 weeks, at some point, week 9, you only have yourself to blame. So, I think humans viable. I just think that, like, you're risking a lot just for the last 2 weeks of the age to come online. And even then, with net worth problems and being slow and whatnot, it's not ideal. So it is what it is. There's probably a way to make it work. There's probably a few ways to make it work, but you've got the same offense as an avian, and the avian's out hitting you like 2-1, and has an extra 20% land because they don't need barracks or stables. It's just a thing. So we'll see how the human works out. I think human has a lot of hybrid and TM potential. I don't see them being hard-hitting core. If you have a lot of humans, maybe it's harder to amnesia all of them and it works out, sort of. But, I'd rather have 50% birth rate than 15% income, so whatever. Orc. Orcs are hilarious. I love orcs. I I might just pick orcs because it's hilarious, but it's also gonna be such a pain in the butt. Um, what do you even say about orcs, man? Um, 30% gains, unreal, so strong. What the hell? 25% draft doesn't matter. 50% sweet, 100% sweet, 25% whatever. It's nice that it's in there, I guess. Elites with credits. Well, that's bullshit. Um, they've got the second best elite in the game with that 15 point and Bloodlust. So they're only slightly worse than Dryad elites. Like it's awful. They're gonna come out of protection and they're gonna farm the whole server. They're gonna 4-tap out of protection with full elites, getting 30% gains. So every orc on the server, 12 hours in age, is going to be 800 acres, and every non-orc's going to be 300 acres. It's going to be really stupid. Then, after people pump a bit, it's similar to Dryad. There's going to be that mid-age point where orc is meeting up against even elites and starts to struggle because they got this 8-point D-spec. So either they're running 25% more D-specs for the same defense, or they just have 20% less defense. Like that's the options. So they're gonna be horribly chained. They're gonna be masked. They're gonna be raised. They're gonna be chained by everything all the time. It's gonna be brutal. So as orc players, you're either hoping that your glass cannon is better than their, hammer. Um, but they're gonna smash TMs. They're gonna smash core. If you just go orc tact, you get bonus credits. You attack faster, meaning that your chains hurt less. You can even run racks, and you can just try to outpace them. And I think it's probably gonna work. I'd love to say that orcs are just gonna fall off for this reason or that reason, but they're not. They're just gonna be age-long menaces that crush everything. But the science thing does start to ramp up mid-age, and it doesn't stop. So the question's going to be, how good of a position can you get yourself in by mid-age because you ran orcs? And this applies to honor kingdoms. This applies to land kingdoms. Maybe applies a little bit less to that just mid-tier, I like to have wars and fun kingdoms a bit. So, if you're in that sort of situation, realize your orcs are gonna maybe fall off a bit, but they're never not gonna have giant gains. They're never not gonna have giant credits, and they're never not gonna have giant offense and kills. So, it is what it is. I'm not sure. Like, because I'm so unsure of what the heck's going to happen with Orc, I'm really not wanting to run them. But I think Orc attacks are just going to be incredibly overpowered for a lot of the age. And I think almost no one's going to bother running them, and we're going to end up in a situation where exactly 2 kingdoms run them. One of them ends up going for Land Crown because no one will war them, and they waved a couple times and they're huge. And the other one's just gonna get, they're gonna have a weird bouncy time in the mid ranks. I don't know. I'm just saying things at this point. Yeah, orcs are bonkers. If you're not really on the ball, you're at a lot of risk of getting incredibly deeply chained, of getting masked to 0 WPA, 0 TPA, raised to 0 build acres. You're at risk of bounce waves and hit armies home and ambushes and, like, taking 30% bonus casualties when you have no hospitals and, like, all sorts of problems. Now, you can sort of semi-hedge your bets. You can run just 1 or 2 extra D-specs per acre, 1 or 2 less elites per acre. You're sort of coming out normal looking, but then you ride that elite credit chain and your extra deep chains, and maybe your TM or other core picks are really good at feeding you soldiers, and every single wave you're training 4,000 more elites, and you just crush people. That's similar to what we saw 6-8 do in Age 107 with their Undead Tax. They had elite credits. Tacticians have bonus credits on trads. They ran a lot of offense, and they just cycled through crazy elite gains. The reason that's not going to work quite as good is last age, those were undeads that were plaguing people. So a lot of mana and resources was being used on the plague. They had built-in minus losses, where these orcs have built-in plus losses, which is, a big difference. So it's going to be easier to control economy, means less draft, means using those elite credits isn't guaranteed. Using any credits on D-specs is going to feel like shit, because, like, that's not very good, which means you're even more of a glass cannon. Like, that's another thing, is that, like, how are you going to get defense in a war? You're going to build these with these? I don't think so. So, I don't know. I think Orc could go anyway. I think it's really in the hands of the user what's going to happen there. So good luck with that. Artisan is unchanged. I liked running 1 Artisan for this, so I could WPA calc rogues for free. The fact that they, like, also got really big and tanky was cool, I guess. I don't have a lot to say. Human artisans are going to get 1-tick builds pretty easily if you're into that sort of thing. If you build a bunch of homes, you're going to have a lot of military. It's cool. Artisan's been around forever. If you haven't figured it out by now, oh well. Clerics, completely different. No more minus casualties or anything. You do have salvations. They have like 15% minus casualties. They've got combined minus 40% like magic damage from Fireball, from Amnesia, from Nightmare, assuming this doesn't get MV'd. You have Revelation, so you got a science buff. And a very weird +1 elite and D-spec value. So for most people, that's just plus 10% defense, Fireball stuff, science. Like, I think almost no one's going to pick Cleric. I think Cleric's sort of bad, but I think you can make it work. But, like, who needs more defense? TMs need more defense. Well, if you're a TM that's not a Mystic or a Rogue or a Heretic, you're not really a TM anymore, so what's the point? The one idea I had was Avian Clerics. You get that extra defense in there. You can even turtle with Elites home, force people to hit you, and then beat them back armies home, because you've got the attack speed. You're going to be super hard to Fireball. Because of this, you can invest a lot in, like, channeling. You're going to be super hard to Amnesia. And importantly, if you're running a tanky build, you're going to be super hard to Nightmare. So the one thing I thought could work pretty cool is a big wall of Avian Clerics. You force people to just wave you. They wave you. You just mass them, or you fully go on their TMs. You beat them home. You sit on your elites again. And you're going to be, like, unkillable. If you got 8 EPA or 8 D-specs per acre and 12 EPA, you're going to have like almost 300 DPA sitting with your armies home. So they're going to use all of their offense just to hit you once, and you're going to beat them home, you're going to ambush them, whatever you do. So I thought that was an interesting thing, because you're going to be a situation where the Avian has like double birth rate while taking half damage fireballs. Like, at some point that might be a little ludicrous, and you're scaling with things like Revelations, so maybe a good meme build, but I don't see it being broadly used or effective. Heretic is more or less same as Last Age. It got a slight channeling buff. I think Heretic's tough because you want to run both TPA and WPA. And with all of the nerfs to TM defense, it's going to be really hard to fit in both Thieves and Wizards. Now, if you play an old school Heretic style where you sort of rely more on the minus losses for sustain, you can start with quite a bit lower TPA and just wait out. Let enemy cores bloat. They bloat. They're easy to night strike. You don't need 6 or 7 or 8 TPA. You can run 3.5, and you never really lose your Thieves. And you get good value. You run extra defense. You got the damage. And being able to Nightmare means that you can chain better, means less offense, means better TMs, maybe. I think it's hard to fit pure heretics in. You can run a pure fairy heretic, you can run whatever you want, but I think it's a little sketchy. I think hybrid Dark Elf heretics are looking great. I think you can run hybrid Elf heretics too. It's just a little tough. You got no good numbers. I'm not sure how to best do it. But it's possible, People used to run a lot of dwarf heretics back in the day. They never had any defense buffs, so we know it's possible, right? I act like it's end of the world on this defense train, but we know it's possible. I think it's leaning more to a hybrid position. I think that the oomph you get out of pure heretics just hasn't quite been there recently. At least that's been my experiences with them. Last Age, both the Land Crown winner and Honor Crown winners didn't rely on heretics. Land Crown because they just never had a war, and War Crown because they didn't have any heretics and they won. So certainly not necessary. Mystics, we got a buff to guilds. That's pretty significant. And you have all the same spells. No, Last Age Mystics had Guile. Weird. I don't know if I knew that. But yeah, they got Mind Focus and extra guilds. Now the only way to get Mystic's Chastity, I don't think that changes anyone's setup much, because everyone has Mystics anyway. But being forced to use Mystic mana on Chastity is a bit annoying. It means you can't just run, like, 2 Mystics that only do MS, and then, like, run whatever else to do everything else. If Chastity is a big part of your gameplay anyways. I don't find Chastity that valuable these days compared to before the nerf, but it is what it is. I think it's fine, but between Mind Focus and 75% guild effectiveness now, the Mystics are piling on Wizards so fast that they're really recoverable. Like, you can lose your Wizards to Mass, to AW, you can get chained and be forced to explore and stuff, and the Wizards are never going to be a huge problem. Last Age, we saw those super elves with extra pop and 12-point D-specs and bonus Wizards out the eyes, and so the Mystics, I felt, struggled a lot Last Age against, like, rogues and elves in general, but we're not going to have that problem anymore. So the Mystic feels great. Rogues utterly unchanged. Rogues like defense a lot. They don't like being chained. They don't like being masked. but those things are almost assured to happen. However, you got AW buffs. Rogue walls are always good. Rogues kill offense faster than anything else. You got steel war horses. You do the most night strikes. With crime bonuses and stuff, you don't actually need 8 TPA to be a rogue. You can run a 5 TPA rogue, and you're not going to fail any night strikes against core. And so you can give yourself that sort of buffer of D-specs early age, at least. But yeah, rogues are same as always, mystics are same as always, heretics are same as always. You just have to deal with those racial changes. Shepherd! Shepherd's a weird one. Because, okay, so this is worth whatever, 5-6% land. That's nice. These aren't worth a lot. This is worth a lot if you have attack speed built in. So maybe if you're like an avian, you get your builds in even with like your 10-hour attack times is pretty strong. If you're building racks, of course, this can be strong. The train time, in theory, gives you a little bit of a better end of war ceasefire pump if you're on a schedule. But you're usually not on a schedule. You can usually just train late and nothing changes. So I don't put much value in train time buffs ever. Immunity to drought, gluttony, vermin, pretty niche. So, 5% land buff, slightly valuable build time buff for war. Reflect Magic's a really good spell. Sure. Resilient Science is not my favorite. It scales a little slowly compared to, say, just like a tactics buff. I much prefer. So, like, I just don't get Shepherd. I mean, yeah, the Scientist generation's great. That's basically Rev that you don't have to cast in war. So, it's sort of like a weird Sage that gives you Reflect Magic. But in terms of, warrior or tactician, I just don't see this being good in war. But, micros are gonna whore out on science with human shepherd. Maybe they even make the resilience science really broken, so you can't even bounce raise them. This is probably what's gonna happen. Not much you can do. Can you run it as a war kingdom? I don't think the shepherd's gonna be very good in war. It's just exclusively a science whore thing, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I'm wrong at least 10% of the time. Tactician is unchanged, I believe. Tactician was incredibly strong last age, and looks strong this age. I think attack speed's really important. I think being able to sync without barracks is... that's a sore spot for me recently. I've been really struggling with keeping waves synced for ever. Even if I run 0 racks and everyone's got the same attack speed, I can't keep a wave together to save my life. So, I talk a lot about this, but it's sort of just a Warbirds problem. But Tactician was really strong last stage. It was the #1 land and #1 honor core pick. It was unchanged, so it's probably very strong again. Often the reason you want something else like Warrior is because then you kill TMs better. If TMs are weaker, Tacticians should be even more beneficial. Dragon's got a buff, so Tacticians should just be really good. The only thing with Tactician I don't love is I find Siege Science pretty negligible. Whereas something like Tactician Science is, like, ridiculously amazing, so in a way it's a problem. If you're in a meta where it's hard to draft enough, it's not very helpful to have bonus credits, but I'd say the last 6 ages, you don't see a lot of wins based on eco in the starvation sense, you win eco because you send dragons. It used to be you won eco because one side couldn't draft, couldn't pay wages, and the other side could, and they'd win. Now you win eco, it's just like you sent some dragons and you're pumping your unbreakables. It's very different than 10, 20 ages ago. I really loved that old-timey meta of eco starving, but between the hospital changes and the home changes and the chastity changes, it's like they nerfed specifically warbirds 20 times in a row. Probably because I keep winning. I don't keep winning. I lost last age. War Hero. This is a weird one. I personally think it's terrible, but kill stacking is something you can do really good stuff with. Like, War Hero's gonna chain people weirdly well. Like, it's not plus gains, it's not plus offense, but you can really start getting people's defenses low, hit them a bunch of times. I think Avian War Hero is probably your best War Hero because of the attack speed. And you want more hits going. You want more chains. You want to hit as often as possible because then you're killing as much as possible. But I don't find converts particularly useful. If you have to win a 4-day war, sure, but if you just were stronger, you might win a 2-day war anyways, sort of thing. I don't think these spells are particularly valuable. Housing science it's a double-edged knife because in terms of raw power, it's probably the strongest science. You can just fit more. Population bonuses are traditionally the strongest bonuses. But I'm a little salty on last age. I ran a lot of sages, and we had some major net worth problems in the late age. And, having 25% more stuff, that's not what this buff gives you. But for example's sake, having 25% more stuff, but they're also 20% worse, so you have the same numbers as someone else, but hugely inflated net worth, is not ideal. It can be a thing you do intentionally that works out, but in general, it's pretty tough to manage. So, it's something that can be good in niche situations, but I feel like if you want to pick a war hero, I'd rather just pick an artisan if you're looking at this. And if you're looking at this, the military casualty portion, I would rather be a warrior and just have more offense and run onslaught and stuff. But if you want to sort of fly under the radar and really surprise people, I think war hero and kill stacking can be really valuable. But all someone has to do is not lose to you, and they win. And how are you going to make them lose to you if you have absolutely no benefit to your entire kingdom? Like, there's nothing in War Hero that makes you stronger. So what's the benefit? It's a little awkward. Warrior. I love Warrior. I don't think it gets picked enough. It gives you offense. It gives you offense. It gives you access to cheaper offense. And it gives you offense. I don't know about you, but I like my attackers to have offense. That's why I call them attackers. It's because they have a lot more offense than defenders and thief mages. So I suggest that more people pick warrior just all the time. So I don't know if there's a lot to say. You don't need warriors to break TMs as much this age. However, if you're in a meta where you're looking at tacticians and avians that maybe don't have huge offenses, if you are a warrior and both sides sort of start playing up their D-specs a bit, because you run D-specs as an attacker to defend against other attackers. So if we're less worried about TMs and more worried about attackers, everyone's going to build more D-specs. It gets to a point often where warriors are able to multi-tap a lot easier, and they really outperform attack speed builds. in very specific niches, it requires a bit of finesse. But common tactic by like Barco in a lot of recent ages is you have 10 D-specs per acre on your core. Maybe you're even keeping a few elites home, and you're sort of putting your opponents in a situation where it's hard for them to double tap. And if you, in response, have warriors that can easily double tap, suddenly you're a lot stronger. This worked out great for 6-8 last age. They weren't warriors, but instead they were undead with really offense-focused builds. As soon as you hit that plague, you're getting the multi-taps in, and that was sort of their counter to Barco and I both running sages. And it worked out for them. We don't have undead or plague next stage. We have warrior sort of filling in that gap, maybe. So we'll see. Yeah. Well, that's all the changes. I think I did a pretty good analysis. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Check out that Utopia simulator for the age that I brought up. You can find it in the Age Change channel. You can ask that guy. I forget his name, but you can find him around. Any questions to change it. But I had a lot of fun playing with a few builds with that thing earlier today and yesterday and the day before, so check that out. Again, I'd love a job if anyone has one. I'm pretty smart. I win at Utopia a lot. I got a business degree. I'm not an asshole outside of Utopia, if that helps. Anyways, thanks for watching Smiles Rants. Catch y'all next time.